Okay, sweet. Hello, my name is Aishwarya Veerabahu. I'm a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I study invasive golden oyster mushrooms. I study their ecology in North America. I study their population genetics and social perspectives around them, and that will hopefully inform their management moving forward.
Amazing. Nice to meet you.
Nice
Matt,
to meet you too.
would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So Matt Wainhouse, I'm the Fungi and Lichen Senior Specialist at Natural England. So my role is very much one of conservation mycology. And that's tapping into everything from facilitating little bits of research, steering bits of research, and advising on um, species recovery, and triple SIs, designations, and so on. So anything fungi sort of ends up coming to me.
Nice. And I'm Chris from MycoPunks. So I run a mycology company in the UK. We supply all different mycology bits for from beginners to small medium-sized businesses all across Europe. So thanks so much for jumping on a call today. It's cool to be chatting with people who are just you know really involved in the mycology scene and in the science in the weeds with the science. Ashwarya, I guess we'll start with you. I just wanted to get some more background on, what is the story of the golden oyster mushroom in America, and maybe then we can go on to what we can learn from America and apply it to the UK.
Yeah. So I think it was brought over to North America for cultivation sometime around the 1990s or 2000s. And it's a very easily cultivatable mushroom, which I think has been one of the things talking to mushroom growers here has really stood out to me. Is like in the difficult space of cultivating mushrooms, this is kind of the easy child. Um, and I don't take that lightly. It's always nice to have something that plays well and plays nicely. And sometime around the 2010s, people started spotting it in the wild. So, and this was around the Midwestern states and also New York. So the first observations were in like Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and New York. And so right around this pretty tight belt of 42 degrees north, I believe. Um, and we don't know exactly, we will never know if it came from a mushroom grow kit, which are sold with increasing popularity these days. We also don't know if it came straight from a mushroom cultivation farm, from maybe somebody doing a log inoculation in their backyard. It could be from any of these sources. I've also learned since talking to mushroom growers that there is a common practice in mushroom farms that you guys have to do where you vent your facilities, right? And so you allow the spores to get out of the facility so that the workers can breathe easier and things don't get clogged up. And so that is also a potential source, with a decent amount of propagule pressure behind that. Um, and so since this early 2010s, the first observations were sometime around like 2014 and 2016. It has rapidly spread, I mean, just exploded from there across the Midwest and Northeast and starting to move west towards Colorado and Texas, and also south towards Mississippi and Alabama. And so, if you can kind of imagine the climates of, and also north into like Vermont and Ontario, Canada.
Right, okay.
And so, if you can kind of imagine the climates of these places, Texas and Colorado, very dry, Alabama and Mississippi and North Carolina, very humid. The Midwestern states, Wisconsin and New York and Ontario, they face solid winters. So we're seeing really a large climate range that it seems to be okay with establishing in. And I think that actually largely mirrors its native range because its native range is from southeastern Russia all the way down through Japan, all of China, and Taiwan. Um, and so that's what we're seeing so far in the In the experiment that I did, it was an environmental survey around some forests here in Wisconsin. We found that the presence of golden oyster mushrooms is strongly associated with lower native fungal diversity. So there are fewer fungal species in the wood habitats that golden oyster has colonized. And we also found that the community composition, the identity of which fungi were able to colonize that space when golden oyster is present, is completely shifted away from what that native community composition used to be. And then the third major thing that we found with some climate modeling and species distribution modeling is that there's a lot more space in North America, especially with climate change, that golden oyster might be able to spread to. In fact, it seems like it can almost double its range in the future because of climate change. And then I also have a preliminary species distribution model for Europe that shows that it will be able to spread throughout much of Europe as well. Um, and so I am decently concerned, and I feel that there's a very, very good chance it will establish and spread in Europe, including the UK. And I've heard that there are a few escapes that have already happened, that it has already occurred in the wild in the UK. And that's pretty concerning. If folks are wondering about wanting evidence for the UK, I think we already have it. The invasive species story is a completely repeated pattern. We see it over and over again. It follows the same pattern every time. And the same is true for invasive fungi. We already have the evidence in North America of what this species can do, how quickly it can spread, and how devastating it can be for native fungal diversity. If it has escaped and taken foot in the UK, I have no doubt that the same thing will follow. I don't think we have to waste our time in the UK for some schmuck PhD student to come along like me and do the sampling and do the repeated thing. I think it's actually just a waste of time and resources. We already have the story that played out in North America. I think the same thing will happen in the UK. And I think that as the climate is changing in UK, it could potentially only make things easier. So you just told me earlier in the meeting that you guys had a long, dry summer this past year in the UK. That's like exactly the conditions golden oyster can handle. My first summer here in Wisconsin, we had a painfully long and dry summer. I was excited to see every other mushroom other than the one I was studying, and all I found was the one that I was studying. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are all my thoughts.
So the sorts of mushrooms that so when golden oyster appears in a new habitat, what sort of mushroom? Obviously, a yellow oyster is a primary decomposer. Is that correct? So it's one of the first mushrooms to get into the wood, and it starts to break things down. And then I guess when it's gone, it paves the way for different fungi to jump on that as a substrate. What are you seeing in terms of the differences between the fungi that you would expect to see there without golden oyster and the sort of follow-up mushrooms that you might see after golden oyster has done its work?
I'm sorry to say that I don't really have an answer to this. I've never done like a successional study of getting snapshots of wood fungal communities before golden oyster, during golden oyster, and then afterwards. So yeah, I guess I'm just not quite sure. What we did see here was that the dominant the dominant fungi that were in the wood, like the native dominant fungi, let's say Serena unicolor was one of the most, pretty much it was the most prevalent fungus in the wood. Also, a white rot, a very sweet little mossy polypore. Um, it was the one that got most heavily affected by golden oyster. And so um, if I were to make an educated guess about what happens there, whatever fungi might be the most dominant in the wood are the ones that get the most heavily impacted. And once the wood goes past a certain stage, and it's like really in that heavy decay, you could possibly see anything pop up on there.
Are you seeing specific tree species that are more affected than others, or
Um, I think I could say yes. From an anecdotal perspective, we see the dead trees that are very common here in America, which it would be elms and ashes. Those are the things that we hear about them popping up on most. But we have also seen them popping up on black cherry, cottonwood, um, gosh, even maple. It was like on a red maple tree, a red oak, um, and I think maybe the worst of all, we even saw it on a processed pine plank.
oh,
So this was not on a pine stump, but like a processed pine lumber that someone bought for a project and left in their backyard. They saw
yeah.
it sprout
Oh,
out of that.
that's a yeah. So just to kind of clear, like one of the things that we avoid as cultivators is generally softwoods, where they carry some pretty heavy antifungal properties that make them very difficult to grow any type of mushrooms. It's also why that when you're walking in the woods, you don't tend to see many mushrooms on sort of pine stuff. But
Yeah,
so in one of your talks, you covered a bit about the climate factors and the sort of similarities around the world with and potential problematic areas. I did see that you mentioned that the yellow oyster had become naturalized in northern Italy. I
yeah.
was just wondering what makes something naturalized versus something being invasive? I mean, this may be a question for either of you actually,
Mm.
but it's yeah, I guess I know that people are trying to sort of steer clear of using just the blanket term invasive for certain species, and there's a follow-up question to that as well, which is, are there any good invasive species that actually are having a good effect on the environment that we should care about?
Yeah, these are super good questions. Um, it first of all kind of sucks that the term invasive is so loaded, right? It's just got like a lot of baggage around it and kind of came out of uh like 1900s wartime, lexicon. But an invasive species I would define as non-native, introduced by humans, spreading rapidly and increasing in population. The difference between that and naturalized is defined as it has succeeded in reproduction and basically creating a self-sustaining population. So we might not yet have crossed the boundary of like spreading widely and like kind of exploding population, but naturalized means it has been able to get a foothold. It's been able to successfully go through reproduction, aka it's found a mating type that it's compatible with. And now that it has reproduced, it has the potential to create a self-sustaining. It's met that criteria of creating a self-sustaining population that can then go up to that the next hurdle, which would be spreading widely and increasing its population rapidly.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
mean, there's the other thing as well about having a negative impact on some form of native biodiversity as well as
Yeah, like that's an interesting point because a lot of people intuitively include that in their definition of invasive. I tend to not include it in my definition of invasive simply because if it is spreading widely and its population is increasing, it must be using local resources and it must be having some sort of impact. But by being able to call it invasive before some scientist has spent 5, 6 years proving the environmental impact, we can get a huge head start on managing it. But essentially, yes, exactly, Matt. Like there's in every case of invasive species, usually there is an instance of negative environmental impact.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I think this is maybe touching on perhaps a different, looking at a sort of regulatory perspective, um, where you need that negative impact to be able to act on it. If that's the evidence by which we need to be able to say, actually, this isn't good. We can stick it on a banned list and then actively sort of manage it as such.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's but that's an interesting point, I suppose. Call it invasive based on those traits, those properties of population expansion. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because if it meets those criteria, it is having an impact.
yeah,
I think this is one of those little hills that any invasive species biologist is like, it's having an impact. Put it on the list sooner rather
yeah,
than later. Like someone will figure out the impact. It will come out soon.
yeah.
But and then Chris, you also asked, are there any invasive species that have good impacts? Um, I I don't know any off the top of my head, but I think I could certainly say that if we're talking about from the human perspective, like many people are super excited to have an edible, beautiful mushroom spreading in North America, like that in a sense
Mm.
is a good impact. And who knows, if you asked all the critters and the squirrels that I've seen who've quickly figured out the golden oyster is a good time, maybe you could say that it's impacting the local fauna. They have a new food source. Um, but so maybe sometimes there are good impacts, but I would say they're never without their negative impacts as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that you can look at depending on whose perspective you're looking at. And it's the same with any invasive species, something
Yeah,
can live in it, something can eat it, you know.
yeah,
Invasive
yeah,
mycorrhizal fungi, the
yeah.
tree is probably quite happy to form that partnership, but it is at the cost of something else.
I was actually
Yeah.
going to ask about, are there any invasive mycorrhizal species? Is that something that we have both sides of the sea?
Yeah, yes, we absolutely do. Even just Amanita muscaria, our most popular red mushroom with the white spots, it is invasive in the southern hemisphere. Yeah, honestly, it's been found a ton of places because it's been imported with the timber industry. Amanita phalloides, the death cap, is invasive. Originally in Europe, introduced to the west coast of North America along with oak trees. Yeah, there are tons of invasive mycorrhizal species as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess it's like so when we look at y- what you would consider like a natural habitat for the golden oyster mushroom, what effect does that have in its natural habitat over, what's kind of keeping it in check over what's happening in the US?
It's a super good question, and I haven't the faintest idea. Yeah, it just hasn't been within the scope of something I've gotten to look at, but it would be really cool to find out. If the one tiny perspective I have on it is one of my lab mates visited China for a month or so, and he said that one of the reasons why golden oyster is rare there is kind of human influenced. Like large parts of China are deforested, due to their recent industrial age. Um, and so the only places, I guess, where there are kind of remaining forests tend to be in like mountainous, remote regions. And so now they're only just relegated to those areas.
Mm.
So that's the only reason that I know. But yeah, it would be cool to find out.
I think
Again,
I
sorry.
was, I was just going to add to that as one of the differences between the situation in North America and China and that is where the golden oyster has come from in North America and some of the work that's been done in Aishwarya's lab has uh, identified the a lot of the golden oysters that are being found are come down to two strains. Is that right, Aishwarya?
So that is work that I'm actually about to start, but you
Mm.
might also be thinking of Andy Bruce's thesis.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they are pretty much commercial strains, and like what I remember from her thesis was like two or three main circles that everything is, yeah, two or three main strains that everything genetically mapped back to.
Yeah. So what the point I was getting to at that, and I know you're going to be doing a lot more work, and we're sending cultures over from the UK and hopefully the rest of Europe to inform this, and really get to the bottom of it. Uh, but within that, it's not a species that is that so it's a strain that has probably had some selection um, to to make it more useful for cultivation. So
Mm.
a lot of those traits like big showy fruits, lots of fruitings per season, really wide temperature tolerance, are all things that make it fantastic for cultivation, but also fantastic for as an invasive running out into the wild. So there, so that might also explain some of the big differences seen between China and Russia and where it's native to within its native distribution and what is being seen in North America. It's kind of like a uh, the golden oyster on steroids, kind of.
Yes,
Yeah, we actually
yeah,
discussed this briefly at All Things Fungi Festival this year, and it's also it's a difficult conversation to have with food producers where, obviously the selection, the sort of breeding and selection of fungi is a very quick turnaround. You can actually,
Mm,
there's stuff that home mycologists can do to produce better flushes and almost like angle things towards different sort of phenotypic expressions.
mm,
So the very fact that that's available to everyone, to do, and it has such a quick turnaround, it also has this difficult conversation where, how do we approach this with cultivators? Do we say, guys, we don't want these, we don't want these sort of monstrous flushes, that are producing billions of spores. Can you maybe just tone things down a bit? So I guess it's a difficult conversation to have with food producers to ask them to be
mm,
more conscious about that. But also, I think I think we'll try and get onto this a little bit later
mm,
about what we can kind of be doing as cultivators to be a bit more responsible.
mm.
What I wanted to speak to you guys about as well was so so the role that you guys are playing right now, where do you kind of see what would you like to see from your combined efforts is what I'm what I wanted to ask. So obviously you're both, you have there's a shared concern here, and I think there's an increasing concern with different cultivators and other people in mycology in general. What's the outcome you'd like to see?
I think the outcome that I would like to see is maybe more than anything else, like conversation and discussion, right, and like a plan for how to deal with non-native fungi that we cultivate, because like it's exactly like you said. I've talked to so many cultivators now, and like become friends with so many of them. I understand, like exactly your guys' side of it too. There are thin profit margins. You're also doing an awesome thing of getting people into mushrooms and mycology. Um, and so I think more than anything else, I just want a community level discussion, not just about the golden oyster. And that's maybe like the part that kind of scares me, right? Is like so much of this conversation is pinned in the center point of golden oysters being invasive. But the truth of it is that like I'm thinking to the next one, like this invasion has already happened here. I'm thinking about the pink oyster. I'm thinking about every other non-native species that we also cultivate. Um, because the fact is like we never get the chance to predict when it escapes and when the conditions are right for it to essentially establish, naturalize, and then become invasive. And so I think I would like to continue talking and have conversations about what are ways that we might have our mushroom and eat it too. What are ways that cultivators could potentially either, cultivate local species and sell those. If there is a way to keep non-native species contained, and just kind of like maybe not necessarily like selling them as grow kits, but maybe just selling them as the mushroom, like already packaged. Just some sort of, if we are going to go down the route of continuing to cultivate non-native species, let's think about containment procedures. If we are going to go a more fully preventative, like a more foolproof route, let's think about how do we cultivate more local species, um, and push those rather than the non-native ones.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. I think it's a. I was saying earlier that I think there's a few ways that you can approach this as a business. You could kind of see it as being like a, oh, I'm already in a pinch here financially, and now I'm being told I shouldn't be selling one other thing that makes me money. And it's a
Yeah,
completely understandable perspective, especially as the costs of inputs for growing in the UK just continue to rise, and
Yeah.
things get harder and harder. Not only just the fact that like being a food producer anywhere in the world is pretty much nightmarish. It's one of the most thankless industries to work in. But I
Yeah.
think that there's a really positive story that we can, the business owners and cultivators can speak to their customers, and they can talk to them about the effect that different mushrooms that are being cultivated have on the environment.
Mm,
And it can form part of a sort of ethical approach to cultivating, and it can just be a really positive thing that brings us together as a community.
mm,
It certainly doesn't, and when you were saying about local native species, I know that there's a lot of people in the UK now that, a lot of cultivators that we work with have their local oyster that they grow, and they're quite proud of the fact that
yeah.
they've taken something from the wild, cloned it, and that's now become their species. So I think it's great to have these conversations, and I think
Mm,
even, in the few years I've been in this industry now since 2019, and just seeing like recently the conversations that everyone is having, and the fact that we're having conversations with Matt from Natural England is and yourself,
yeah.
Ashwa, it shows that we're actually reaching out, and we're not just closed off as we're not just an
Yeah.
industry to that's just here to make money. So
No. And I'd actually say it's what you and the cultivators are doing is much more than that. And I think you're being kind of humble, actually. I really do see it as leadership. It's recognizing what the issue is, looking at the evidence, and making that really difficult decision a lot of the time, recognizing it's going to that there is an economic impact on yourselves. Um, and if and it was a real privilege to be invited to the Cultivators Network at All Things Fungi with Rich from Plant Life, and to be able to talk with you guys about this, and going into it thinking like, Christ, we're in for a grilling, they're not going to like our message, but actually to have this really productive and engaged conversation with uh well um with a group who are super, super engaged, do really want to do the best thing. Um, Came out just feeling really inspired. So it really is a situation with as just pure leadership, I think, from the cultivator's part. As a regulator, we are fairly powerless, unless there is some form of regulation. But that takes, a really long time to get something on the invasive species list. It's going to take potentially years,
yeah,
and the evidence requirements are such, that, in that space of time, you could imagine that something like the golden oyster could just rapidly expand and be uncontainable. At the moment, it's containable, and
yeah,
it's only containable because of, like I say again, the leadership shown by the cultivation community in recognizing the issue and saying, actually, do you know what, we can do something about this now.
yeah.
Um, and so,
And
yeah, going back to that original question of, what did we want to see? Um, that was high on my high on my like on my the list of things that we that we really did want to see. Um, didn't think it would be anywhere close to as um, uh, I was going to say as easy as it has been. I haven't had to do anything at all, which is why it's easy for me. It's you guys
Productive, yeah.
that have done that. You guys have, that have done the hard work. But that was something that was high on the agenda. How can we convince the cultivating community to see what's going on and act? But you've already done it. You're in the process of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, hats off to you guys.
Yeah, I think it is good, and I think that's why these sort of mycology meetups and the fact that there's such a close community in mycology, and
Mm.
we can have conversations even outside of our own country and talk about these things and take action relatively quickly is brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit more, Matt, about you know about Natural England and and sort of their involvement, how they are involved with non-native species and and what the a bit about what the process is when you find something that you think is problematic.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. And it's admittedly something that it's a process I'm still learning. Um so Natural England, I guess to start with, we are the nature conservation agency for England. But invasive species don't just affect England. We are an island, and so we have the Great Britain Invasive Non-Native Species Secretariat. And they coordinate action across the three countries of GB, so with Wales um, and Scotland as well. Um, and so there's a lot of talk between the three nations. There's between either the invasive specialists or biosecurity specialists, depending on country. Um, uh, and they also feed the Secretariat, the Non-Native Species Secretariats, feed up to the biosecurity minister. But when something like golden oyster shows up and we're worried, the first thing that we do is what we call rapid risk assessment. And this is a collation of data, of the evidence, everything that we know about the species, what is happening elsewhere, why we're concerned, and trying to predict to some extent what the impact is going to be, whether that's environmental, so in this case, the impact on deadwood biodiversity, or whether it's economic or social. Um, and that's brought together to sort of give an overall risk and then also looking at how confident we can be at that level of risk. So for something like golden oyster, we'd probably say that the environmental risk is really quite high. And based on the evidence that we've got, we'd probably say that we're fairly confident on that as well. Whereas something like the economic is the risk is probably fairly low. And again, we can be fairly confident on that as well. Um, so that is then fed up to the secretariat, and from there a decision is made about what are the next steps. And so from the rapid risk assessment, there's a more detailed process of evidence collation, before it can then sort of enter the realms of regulation. But this is not and the regulation then would do something like banning sale, but it's not. It's a really long process.
Yeah,
Anything that involves regulation or it really is, particularly as well. You're asking if you're preventing something like the ban of sale, um, it might be that we have to do some work to understand actually what is the economic impact of that. So it's a long-winded process, and we're with gone. We've done the rapid risk assessment, and so that is going before the Secretariat panel, and so we're just sort of awaiting the next steps, really.
yeah. Is anything like this happened before with fungi in the UK? Are there any other species that have concerned you this much?
So so going back to what Aishwarya was saying, about being concerned about edible species, and the risk from cultivation. We've probably got a much uh, we tend to be a little bit rose tinted, I think, and so things like the edible fungi or mycorrhizal fungi, where we often see the good side, and it's maybe a little bit our judgment is a little bit clouded, and so we've sort of tended to ignore those a little bit and ignore the impacts. So, for me, the other worry is mycorrhizal inoculation. There's lots. There's a the industry there is huge, and it's only going to grow with all the tree planting that we're planning. And that is another risk area for me. But both of these areas, I think, have been pretty poor in terms of our horizon scanning. We're really good at picking up on pathogenic fungi, things like ash dieback, things that are going to impact on plant health. But everything else we've kind of forgotten about. Um, and this is something we really do need to get better at. There's been much better action on this horizon scanning across all fungi in Europe. And I think it's something we need to do here as well. So the other recent one, or relatively recent, would have been the orange ping pong bat fungus,
Mhm.
Favalacia plaudipus, which is spreading quite rapidly now through the UK. Now, there was a risk assessment done for this, but it sort of by Martin Ainsworth from Kew about 10 years ago, but it entered a pipeline and just sort of vanished and wasn't picked up again. So we're picking that one up again as well now because it is
Yeah.
continuing to increase. It's
Yeah.
it's now in London, it's in the New Forest, all the way up to Coventry. It's colonized Wales. It's in Ireland.
Yeah.
So that is expanding, possibly at a similar rate to golden oyster, um, or maybe not as fast as golden oyster actually. But that is in my eyes, it's a blueprint of what is happening, right? We failed to control that. We've got we've got the evidence and we've got the time, I think, is still on our side with golden oyster.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
I
other
think
thing with
like,
Pavlasia as well is that we don't know what the impact is. There's not been any serious research into understanding what the impact is. But my guess is it could be fairly similar to
it's so
golden.
beautiful as well.
We
That's the
don't know.
problem, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I mean, this is it.
It's such a
It's
treat
beautiful.
still.
That golden oyster, they're the most photogenic fungi.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
they
Yeah.
really are stunning.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think yeah, I mean that I've been following the that specific species on iNaturalist and seeing what records have been popping up and the geography of it is quite astounding how, over quite a short period it seems to be really spreading. And that may be, due to the fact that there's obviously this huge rise in people getting involved in naturalism and actually getting
Yeah.
obsessed with listing and documenting their finds, which I think's rad as well. I'm like a
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
is.
I think it's a that
Yeah.
definitely
My project would not exist if it were not for people being excited and reporting things.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and and it really is. It really is platforms like iRecord or iNaturalist, and then that information being made accessible to people like Ashwarya who are doing this kind of study, or to people like ourselves to understand, what the risk is, to be able to keep an eye on it. We would not be anywhere close to be able to deal with this kind of issue without that community of citizen scientists.
yeah.
It's so critical to absolutely everything. They underpin so much of our what we're able to do, what we're able to learn.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like disproportionately it feels like with fungi as well that there are so many people who are able to do pretty good citizen science with
Yeah.
with fungi,
Mm.
and even down to like you said, even down to simple as logging something without any idea of what it is,
Yeah.
and just actually learning to take a couple of good photos of a mushroom and putting it on on iNaturalist or one of these platforms that shares stuff with the
Yeah.
wider scientific community.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
kind of plays in a little bit to my sort of last question, which is, Ashwarya, I'll start with you. What can people in the US be doing to support your efforts with the golden oyster sort of spread? And obviously, we've just talked about just at its simplest level, there's foragers and mushroom ideas that can be logging logging observations. Are there anything things that the wider sort of mycology community can do to support you?
Yeah, I think just like you said, a big part of it would be just observing it and then uploading that to online biodiversity databases. Um, talking just talking about the idea of invasive fungi at all, like having these conversations about it, whether it's at a dinner party or, with your partner or whatever it is. First of all, it's kind of just a weird topic, but we need to have a cultural conversation about it, um, if people can not antagonize and campaign against mushroom companies, that would be awesome. Like I think it's one thing to write your favorite mushroom company that you've been buying products from and be like, hey, I learned that this is invasive and I saw it on your website, like I guess could you guys tell me a little bit more about that? That's
Mm.
one thing, that's an opportunity to form a deeper relationship between a consumer and a mushroom grower slash seller. Um, but I think one of the most important things that the community can do is not rush to judgment and especially not rush to villainizing. Like the whole point
Yeah.
is that this is the first edible mushroom to really, really escape and take storm as much as it has. So we are all dealing with this together for the first time, Um, and yeah, and I think maybe the last thing that I would love for the whole community to do, sellers, amateur mycologists, conservationists, all of us together, is just think about biodiversity on this earth, right? They've been evolving alongside us for millions and billions of years. And, to kind of jump off of what Matt was saying earlier, that you guys are showing true leadership. You guys are also showing one of the truest forms of strength there is, which is considering biodiversity, this thing that does not have a mouth, this thing that does not pay you, and, weighing it against your livelihoods, like something that does feed you and your families.
Mhm.
And it's a very it's kind of one of the core human struggles that is happening around the world right now. And some people are not bothering to have it at all. And it's affecting all of the rest of us and all of our natural spaces. And so I'm deeply, deeply grateful that you guys are pausing and thinking about it. It means the world. And we love our fungi. It's the whole reason all of us found ourselves in this community, right? Is like loving fungal biodiversity is exactly what got us here together. So yeah, just continue to reflect on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. Yeah, I love that. Matt, on the UK side, is there kind of obviously we're there are things in motion.
Mm.
One thing I did wonder as well is it recommended that if you do find this in the wild that it's picked and eaten? Is that is that something that we're recommending, or are we allowing things to sit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it's one that I don't have a very good answer for. So, um, so we know that it's obviously at least two locations that we know of for sure. Um, what I think my my ideal scenario would be that those logs are destroyed in some kind of way. But if people are out there and they do see it and they are tempted to pick it and eat it, then yes, pick it and eat it, take it back, but please take the photos first and record it. Get it onto iNaturalist, get it onto iRecord, let it get onto the NBN, onto GBIF, alert Natural England or NRW or Nature Scott, wherever you are, um, so that we can understand where this species is popping up, so that we can respond to it in the best way that we can. Whether that, uh, and like I say, yeah, we don't. There is no funding to do this now. There is no funding to go and cut up a tree with it on. Um, and there's no regulatory requirement to do anything like that. That
Yeah.
is the problem that we're facing. So, but but yeah, if it is found, if anyone is finding it, whether they're foraging or out for a walk or whatever, it's so important that they are logged and those the locations are passed on to um the databases where we can pick them up.
Yeah, yeah, that's very cool. I've got one last bonus question, which is going to seem like this is like a devil's advocate
Okay.
question. It's actually a question that came up to at the festival, which at the time I kind of responded. I almost felt a bit annoyed at the question, but as time goes on, I'm kind of like I kind of understand the question as well. The
Mm,
question was about obviously if this is here now. and it's or same with the US. Like if it's already spreading and it's got a foothold, why should we, isn't that just part of the natural process now? Should we not, see the acceleration of this and the release of it from human beings as just being part of nature? And why should people care, I guess, that that this is spreading? Is it not just a natural process? It sounds like a negative thing to end on, by the way, because I actually should what I should have done was actually ended on the last question. But
Yeah,
we're gonna just sneak this one. This is like a I'll just cut this off at the end.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'll put it in at the beginning.
well, it is a great question though, but it's not just about golden oyster and when it came up at all things fungi, it was just a bit of a swipe, just like
Yeah.
oh gosh, how do we deal with this? Um, but it's a bigger question than just golden oyster, isn't it? It's about any invasive species, where it's become invasive because it has been moved around by humans in some capacity, right? Um, and there are two ways to look at this. One would be sort of fairly nihilistic, I suppose, to some extent, and just say, you know what, it's here. Let's not do anything about it. It's still a living organism. It's finding a new space, and maybe over time things will adjust. But um, there is a moral question in this as well, which is about, you know, if we know, like Aishwarya's work has demonstrated, that golden oyster or any invasive is having an impact, a negative impact. Um, do we respond to it in the best possible way that we can? And I would argue that we do. There is a moral responsibility there to deal with stuff. And you could look at um, something like uh, wrinkled peach, wrinkled peach fungus,
Hmm.
um, which is an elm associate. And so golden oyster has done really well on elm in the US, and it's certainly on elm on at least one of the locations in the UK.
Hmm.
That's globally red listed as near threatened. Um, if we uh, allow golden oyster to continue and it takes over, continues on elm, the habitat of this near threatened species, um, then the extinction risk of wrinkled peach is only going to go down. You
Hmm.
know, where we need to, we're really trying to work towards species recovery. Um, and so, just by looking at that, are things going to be at higher risk of extinction? And it's extinction, that's the highest price.
Yeah.
Um, if we don't act. Um, and that is, and of course, yeah, extinction is a natural process.
Yeah.
But if we've got the ability to prevent it, particularly if we're implicated, then I would say then yeah, we do have that moral responsibility does sit with us.
Yeah, and that again is just, this is just this is something that produces a pretty fruiting body as well. So we're not
Mm,
even thinking about the species that, the amount of sort of networks of mycelium that just haven't produced
mm,
mushrooms, all those things that are going to be displaced, and the unseen, smaller and smaller biodiversity sort of habitats all the way down that are affected by
yeah,
loss of food source, or displacement of just the tinier things.
yeah,
um Look, I've had such a lovely time chatting to you guys.
yeah.
I think this has been really useful, and I if people want to follow either of your sort of your efforts, what's the best way to do it, Ashwarya?
Woof. Uh, I guess
LinkedIn.
I don't know. Just just email me.
Okay, I will put your email at the end of this, so you can
Thank
expect
you.
all sorts of oddball customers of ours to reach out to you over there. And Matt,
Yeah, I have a website I don't update. I don't have any social media. Just email me. That's
what a
actually how you
luxury.
can get in touch with me.
That sounds so good to be that level of unavailable.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, how to contact me. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. mostly shouting about fungal conservation. Um, but otherwise, you can contact me directly if you've got my email address. I'm happy for you to share that,
Yeah.
Chris. Um, I know there's definitely this uh, uh, impression that maybe Natural England sort of sit in this sort of little ivory tower sometimes and don't communicate. But we're desperately, I am desperately trying to break down that barrier. I am here, I'm a
Same,
person, and I do answer emails, and you can get in touch, give me a call, whatever.
Yeah.
I work for you guys at the end of the day.
same.
So,
Very
Likewise.
cool.
happy to be contacted about this.
Yeah, nice one. And no one wants to contact me, so it's fine. So except all the wrong sort of people. So look,
Yeah.
guys, thank you ever so much for joining me. And it's lovely chatting. And yeah, we'll keep in touch. And I'll try and kind of share the ongoing progress of the collective community and yourselves with
Mm,
in regards to this, and hopefully maybe a more structured framework that we can all use to
mm,
to actually just apply to any new potential threats to our biodiversity. So
yeah.
thank you ever so much.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And
Yeah.
I
Thank you,
do,
Chris.
yeah, and I do just want to say thank you again because it really has been quite a humbling experience, I think, for me as well, to engage with yourself and other members of the cultivating network of mycologists. So yeah, like massive thank you for all you guys are doing, because it's making our job like a million times easier.
That's good to
Um,
Yeah.
hear.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
thank
and
you.
send me those cultures. Send me the cultures.
Yeah, I've got some cultures. We will. I'm in touch with quite a few people in the US as well, so I can kind of put the word out for people to send their cultures. I have a
Okay.
feeling that like in the same way that in the EU, there's a lot of cultures come from the main sort of the OG breeders of mushrooms.
Mm,
So we can a lot of that stuff's going to be traced back to those, I think, and then we as cultivators buy loads from the US as well. So
yeah,
Okay.
it is what it is. But so you'll probably
Yeah.
find the stuff that comes from the UK, half of it matches exactly what you've got in the US. So
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
anything.
but
Well,
that's a really interesting
that
part of
will
the
be
story.
interesting to find. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah. That will be.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
I'm available. Like anything you need from me, just let me know. And lovely to chat
Sounds
to you.
good.
Have a good rest of your
Thank you.
day.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. You all as well.
Take care,
Nice one,
guys.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.